So I've arrived at the address. DTC brought me here to see what we've come to see today, and it is a little bit special. Look at her. It's DTC's sister. So here's the mystery car that we were talking about that we've come to see today. Yep, you guessed it. 996 Factory Aero XAA car. Gen 1 3.4, just like DTC, but totally original car. Sports exhaust, a very, very unusual interior, which is MC, which comes up as rouge, but honestly, to see it on camera, it may look a bit red, but in the flesh, it's a sort of browny colour. Extended leather steering wheel, Techniquit gear knob, handbrake, Alcantara headlining. The list goes on. It's a really well spec car. It has got the factory radio with it as well as the aftermarket one. Heated seats. We check the codes under the bonnet, and you'll see that all of this stuff on the car, including the all-important XA, the engine code, which you can just see there. It's a bit crinkled up, but you can see it. Arctic Silver, MC, I think that is, which is the interior colour code of red. So we'll look into that a little bit more, because I'm thinking it's more like a cinnamon than it is a red. So initial inspection on the interior as well, as you can see, it's in absolutely fantastic condition. The usual few little chips along here and a couple, one particular one up there on the dashboard, but nothing major, very easy to get on top of. Steering wheel wear is great. It's done 94,000 miles. It's an amazing story to the ownership of this car as well. A few little chips around there as always. And like I say, light wear on the bolster of the seats, so certainly nothing major on the interior. Initial inspection on the bodywork is very, very good. She's really straight. Usual corrosion starting in the inner arches, but all surface stuff, nothing serious at all. You can get on top of this now very easily. It's not been repaired and filled. This one's had a little bit of touch up done before, but nothing major. The offside one is in better condition again, and same on the front. Most of these actually come from stone chips, because obviously, as you see the tyre there, as the stone's coming up and hitting the inside of the arch, you'll get spots like that where that's a chip, and what happens is the water gets in there and then corrodes it, lifts the paint and starts to bubble. So it actually looks worse than it is. By the time you scuff that off, either run a schutz around there, it doesn't break the outside edge of the paint, so you can make a small localized repair and actually black those with stone chip or something decent like that, which will prevent it from rusting further and protect it from stone chips. Just looking at the headlight condition, starting to yellow around the edges, but again, probably refurbable. They are starting to go. You could probably scotch them down, or bit of Trizac 3000 and polish them up with a 3-stage polish or a bit of Maguire's. We do have a burn there, burn patch slightly underneath the lacquer. I think that's old. I think it has had some paint across the front, but you know, it's entitled to the age of the car. Probably stone chips. Obviously, if you're going to do that and you notice something like front paint, jack the car up, look underneath at the front tub, check that's in good condition, pop the bonnet and look inside all the shut wells and make sure it's right. So we'll do that now. So we've got the bonnet up now. Now obviously an indication that it's not had any big front end damage is that the bonnet's original. You can see it's the original factory chassis label. Quite often when they're missing, the bonnet's been replaced or repaired to a degree where it's, you know, it's had the whole bonnet painted, and as you look down the inside edges, there's no dry overspray marks. So I would imagine that this paint was done quite early on in its life, and it was probably for stone chips, main dealer maybe even. It's nice and dry in here, but always you can pull these carpets back and you can inspect inside there for any damage around the footwell areas, the front of the tub. Also good to put your hand around there to check for rust. Other places to look for water ingress is piling up here. You see the drain there? You've got one drain there and one drain there. Nice bit of wax oil in the battery. That's not water, that's grease, which is good to see. Someone cares. And there's no water, standing water inside either of the drain wells, which is why the car's nice and dry inside, which I'll show you where to check for as we move back to the inside of the car. So I'm happy that the car hasn't had any substantial damage and that it is merely cosmetic. The bumper may have even scratched the bottom, possibly dented it, may even have a bit of filler in it, but it's all in the bumper, it's not in the chassis of the car. So here we are again, back in the gorgeous interior, which we still haven't decided is rouge, cinnamon or terracotta. But the places to look for damp. Now firstly, if a car's got damp, you'll get bits of mould, especially around the top of the A-pillars, on the sun visors. You'll get mould on the mirror here, black mould, because if there's moisture in the car, that's where you'll find it. It will have some telltales, plus obviously a musty smell. Now this car doesn't have any of that, so that's a great thing. But just to be sure, just to double check, pull the mat forward, put your hands into the far corners and push down. See any moisture, any wetness at all, put your hands up under here. You can feel the padding. So if it's leaking behind the dash panel, anywhere around the back of the dashboard, bottom of the windscreen, then you will look for damp around those areas. Again, your ECU is under here for your alarm immobiliser system. So this is areas you do not want getting wet, because if you do, you'll be in big trouble. Pull the seat forward, lift the mat out, check all the rear and make sure you slide your fingers underneath the carpet. So my knuckles are now touching the bottom of the car, so there is no water whatsoever under there, so that's really good. The next place to check is the pod of the seat. So the pod of the seat, if you get leaks from the rear windows, it will leak through the door card down here, gets trapped under the pod. So it can be dry there, but actually wet under there. So lift the pod up, they're only Velcro, and put your hand under, feel under the carpet, all around, look for mould. Look for mould on the seat belts, pull the seat belts out, look for any mould residue around there, and there's nothing again. These are the telltale places for water leaks. So having checked both sides, both the driver and the passenger footwell, front and rear, and both pods, cannot find any water in the car at all. It's a big thumbs up on the water leak. Water leaks are generally caused from the scuttle panel filling up because the drains are blocked. There's a rear pipe that runs along here, down here and at the back, and is designed to drip water through there and out into the arch. That gets blocked, which is why the rear pods fill up. One of the biggest causes are the windscreen seals, bottom of the dashboard, rear screen can leak. These windows cannot be bonded properly if they've ever been out. But of course, the big leaks on these cars come from the sunroofs, which this one doesn't have, which I love. Of course, that makes it a bit rarer, as we know, to be a non-sunroof car, because it's very much like the GT cars. Wheels wise, we've got the GT3 Sport Classics 2-piece, looking pretty good condition. They don't look like they've been done, but this one here is curbed, near side rear. Can't see any curbing on that one. They've been refurbished, possibly, maybe, because they're not diamond cut. So I would say they have been refurbed once in their life, because they've been painted silver. Obviously the factory wheels are diamond cut with silver centres. This one, and then the offside front, again just some slight curb in there, but nothing major. You know, the worst one, as always, the near side front. This is the worst of the wheels. So you can see quite heavy curbage around the bottom of there, but it hasn't touched the spokes, it is just the lip. And being that it's silver now, not diamond cut, you could potentially just touch that in, smooth it out with a bit of 1000 and touch it in if you didn't want to get into refurbing. Personally, I'd refurb the wheels again and have them diamond cut back to factory standard. As I said, I mentioned the tyres are good and the condition of the wheels, but let's look beyond that now and let's look at the brakes. So the discs themselves are heavily pitted and corroded, and with Porsche 911s and a lot of Porsches, everyone looks at the outside of the disc. I've seen cars that have perfect exteriors to the discs, but when you put your hand in and touch the other side, they feel awful. So always jack the car up, look underneath and look from the back of the disc if the front of the disc looks good, because sometimes the telltale sign is at the back of the disc. On this car, the front of the disc is bad, which will only tell you that the back's worse. So this car is in need of discs and pads. Laying on the floor now, getting down and dirty, which is the only way to check one of these cars out properly. So on the jack, I haven't quite got off the ground, but we've got enough room to look underneath here. Now always check underneath the cars, certainly the sump, and as you'll see on this car, it's very, very dry. Now that's what we're looking for. Dry, dry, dry. We don't mind old black oil leaks because that means they're old and they're dry. It means they're not leaking anymore. Yes, the manifolds look rotten and rusty, but as we all know, that's an outer sacrifice shell, so don't be put off by this corrosion. That's all normal. What we're looking at is all the structural parts and the bushes and that. That's the anti-roll bar. You can see it's quite heavily corroded, but probably structurally sound. The drop links do, however, look very old, and I certainly would recommend replacing those. The lower arms and steering arms and turning arms are all original, as are the shock absorbers, so certainly some attention done there, but they're not rattling and it doesn't cause a problem to drive the car. If you look at the off-centric bolts, they actually look really good condition, like they've been replaced, so potentially you might actually be able to undo them without taking them up, cutting them off. But as I've said to people before, it's something I'd recommend on these cars anyway. They're at that age, you'd have to recommend doing all the lower arms and bushes and drop links, especially if you're going to drive the car fast or if you're going to track the car. It's got to be a must-have. The exhaust system, as I've said, is not standard. It's got a modified exhaust system, but it's a lovely system. It looks of high quality stainless steel to me, done very nicely and sounds fantastic. They've deleted the second lambda, which is why it also probably sounds even better and just one less thing to go wrong. But generally speaking, underneath the car, it's just honest. It's just really honest. It's not trying to hide anything. There's no wet patches, there's no oil leaks. Also look at the person's driveway. Car's been here 4 or 5 days, there's no drip marks, there's no oil on the floor. Under the front arch now, as you can see, if you look at the top mounts, they're not the worst I've seen, but there is some corrosion there. Now the bump stops at the top are always looking a bit scabby on these cars at these age, so they're certainly deteriorated quite badly. There's a bit of rust at the top of the struts, and there's a bit on the top mount, but it's not major, and it's certainly not spread into the chassis of the car anywhere. And on drive, they do not, I repeat, they don't drive like they're on marbles. They don't rattle. It's not bumpy. It's not bad enough to really panic about them, but they are creaky. But this could be also a lubrication thing, as you can appreciate. Just pop the boot. Engine bay is nice and clean, everything looks good, coolant colour's fantastic, nice and pink, exactly what you want to see. All looks good under it. Oil level is good, but it is quite black, so yeah, definitely wants an oil change. Last oil change, because I'll tell you the story about the car, but the last oil change was a while ago, right back in 2017, because the car's actually been sitting for quite a while, so it's not been used. It's got the K&N induction kit on it, which isn't one of my favourite kits, and not many people's, obviously, because it sucks in hot air. In fact, you can feel how hot the cone is already, so that might be something that wants putting back to factory standard. And just another little niggle, but the rubber, this always happens on these things break away up here, so you can see it's lost its shape and it needs sticking back on. But other than that, everything appears to be as it should. Engine mounts look in good condition, struts are quite tidy, there's no obvious signs of rust or corrosion anywhere in here. Same with the lower panel, all in immaculate condition. AC pipes look good. Compressor looks in good shape. We will test that in a minute to check it's running. And like I say, the coolant colour is exactly as it should be. So under there is a big thumbs up. Right, so we're going to just cold start the car now. Hasn't been started for about 4 days, so the car's at a good angle. Obviously we might get some sort of cold start rattle because the car's not used regularly, and the fact that it's sitting at an angle even still now, so the oil's going to be mostly onto that side. But we're going to have a look at that and see how it looks on the exhaust. So on initial start, there's no condensation or smoke. What we're looking for now is to let the engine warm through. If there's any oil leaking into any of the cylinders, it will start to burn off. If you do get any sort of smoke like that, a little bit is acceptable on these cars, because you've got to remember when you're cornering these cars, the way the cylinders sit, oil can leak through into the cylinders, and sometimes on cold start you can get a little bit of a burn up like that. It's absolutely normal. I mean, look, you can see it's already gone now. It's almost down to a conversational point. Obviously condensation to smoke is very different. Condensation will bellow out, but it disappears very quickly, evaporate. Smoke will bellow out and stay there. So this is very, very minimal. It's just a really good sign. Now if you listen to the engine, we've got a slight tapping noise coming, tick-a-tick-a, exactly the same as DTC. That could be the hydraulic lifting. But again, if the car's not used, not driven, it's not been rev high, it's a common thing. On cold start, that's a good go. So another thing I always do with these cars is once you get them idling and you've got a bit of temperature in them, don't do it straight from cold. You just increase RPM, cold RPM, then you look for room to smoke. So the other thing we need to do as well with these cars is check the oil pressure, check the engines up to oil pressure. On idle you'll see the cars bouncing between, you know, late 2s, 3, something like that, that's fine. But as you accelerate, you want to see that get right up to 5, which it does. So again, that's good. It's good oil pressure. It's not dropping down into those 1s or under the 2s. You really don't want to be seeing that. You certainly don't want to be seeing 1s, and you need that oil pressure to be getting right up to 4 to 5, which it does, so that's good as well. Welcome back. So we're in the car now, we're driving, just cruising down a nice little bit of bypass road, and it feels really good. It's a, you know, I don't think it's bangy, if I'm honest. It feels really tight. I looked at the condition of the arms and the bushes, and they look dry, they look old because they are original, but actually now they're moving, they're up to a bit of temperature, everything's moving around and finding itself. It drives really sweet, to the point that I'd say they're not something that needs immediately changing. You know, I think all these cars at this age can do with new bushes, new top mounts, new lower arms. I think that's a given, and I think if you're certainly going to track any car of this age, I would suggest you do them outright, 100%, because, you know, those will corrode over time and they can break. Very slight bit of pull to the left, but that's just tracking and balancing, but it's minimal. Brakes are awful, fade like house. It needs new disc and pads all around, 100%. And as I said on idle, there is a little misfire that when you're in the low revs, and certainly if you're trying to labour the engine, she can jolt on. So she's just dropping a cylinder and then it's coming back in. But through the rev range, once the revs are up, she's fantastic. I mean, she's sitting now comfortably at 3.5 to 4 bars on the engine. Slight down change to third, accelerate, engine pressure's going straight up with the revs, and the exhaust sound is great. I would suggest it's definitely got sport boxes. It's not listed under the spec of the car, so they may not be original, but it does have rear sport cans. I don't know what brand yet, but I'll look into them as we look back further through the car. Thought I'd give you a little test of the exhaust note. Ready? Go for a tunnel. Right, so we finished the inspection on the car, and yeah, she's got potential to be a really good car. She's kind of an 8 out of 10 really, and she could be turned into a 10 out of 10 quite easily. It doesn't need a dramatic amount of money unless you can't do work yourself. If you can't do the work yourself, then you are going to have to put your hands in your pocket like you will with most of these old cars. But you know, immediate thing, you know, for my standards, I'd have to get the bodywork done. I'd have to do that dent. I'd have to do, I mean, the fact it's a non-sunroof car is a real bonus. The colour of the interior, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but for me, I love it. I'd have to respray that front bumper. I'd have to do the dent man dents. I'd have to refurb the wheels, just because I'm finicky and I like it perfect. But they don't all have to be dones. The air conditioning isn't getting cold. Now I can't really see the pump engaging, but the revs are idling right, so it could just be a regas. Certainly worth a try, but I can't be sure that it's not the pump. So fingers crossed it's not, because it's an expensive job. Brakes all round, definitely got to have brakes all round, and these brake pipes have got to be addressed because this one is now leaking after our test drive. So the whole pipe from the front runs right round to the back, probably the pigtails as well will need doing, as well as disc pads all round. So brakes is the number one thing. As far as the top mounts and the bushes and the suspension arms go, I'm not overly convinced they're in immediate work, but certainly take them off and lubricate them and grease them would certainly help with the creaking and may resolve the problem. But certainly long-term ownership, you'd want to be doing things like that on this car anyway. This is an original car. It's very original. Original means it's a 2001 car. The year's 2023, so everything's 22 years old. So remember that, folks. The suspension, the bushes, the springs, the brake pipes, if they haven't been replaced already, they're 22 years old. So appreciate that, and appreciate if you want to take that car around a track or up to 130 mile an hour down a country lane, you're running on 22-year-old componentry that probably will want some attention. And when these cars are not driven, certainly things like rubber deteriorates. It gets hard, it gets brittle, just like this brake pipe. The brake pipe was on the edge of bursting. It's not been driven, it's not been used, wasn't a problem. Now I've gone out and given it a footful, lots of heavy braking, the pipes burst. So those are the things that happen when things are old. So if you're going to own a car like this, you do want to put the money into it and make it right. But she has got massive potential to be a really good car, because it's an honest car with fantastic history, and that all goes a long way. So my opinion is I like to buy cars like this and buy them honest, buy them right, and then add my bit. I'll do the brakes, do the pipes, do the arms, do the suspension, lube things, clean it, make it a better car, and then make that a 10 out of 10 car. And then whether I decide to sell it on or just keep it, I must admit at the moment it's pulling on my heartstrings as a keeper. And I've brought my wife with me, who would actually normally say no more cars. I think she likes it so much she might want to keep it. Maybe it's his and hers. We can have the Jodie can have that one, and then we got pack of Dan's Tech there, look, his and hers. Danny's the race car, Jodie's the more comfortable race car. Right, well, keep in touch, keep following. Remember, hit subscribe and like, and watch what happens with this one, and we'll see where it ends up. Thanks very much.